Depression. It feels so absurd sometimes because you feel physically incapable of doing things that are so easy for other people.
Anxiety, thinking so irrationally about the past that the future seems unfeasible.
Now, these are just two of the many mental health experiences out there. This is not an indication of everyone's lived experience.
So most of you probably have some idea of what mental health is. Maybe you watched One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in your high school English class. Maybe you've perused the pamphlets on mental health at the health center when you've been waiting for your flu shot. Maybe you had a friend of a friend who had to leave a party once early because of her anxiety. And what we'll find out today is that most likely you've probably experienced some symptoms of mental illness yourself. But the prevalence and gravity of mental illness on college campuses especially is largely underreported. So today we're going to look at some statistics. So we'll start out with depression. 1/3 of college students report that they have felt so depressed that they could not function. So this room fits 360 people, and although it's not completely filled right now, we'll just assume that it is. That means that 120 people in here have felt so depressed that they could not go along with their everyday life. Next, we'll move on to anxiety, the big kicker, affecting the most college students, 41.3% of the population. And 50% of college students have reported that their mental health was either below average or poor. So again, assuming that everyone in here has either been in college or is currently in college, if you look to your left and to your right, it means that at least one of these two people has experienced mental health that was either below average or poor. Now, I say this not to depress you, but because this is a very serious public health concern, leading me to my next statistic, which is on suicide. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among college students. There's more deaths per year from suicide than there are from alcohol-related causes, and this is concerning. So in order to matriculate at Connecticut College, every student has to participate in a program called Alcohol EDU. It's an online interactive program that takes a few hours, and it's designed to reduce the negative consequences of alcohol use, which is really important, admittedly. But there's no program designed to reduce the negative effects of what will be more likely to kill Connecticut College students, which is mental health issues. And this is because there's little to no discussion at all surrounding mental health issues. Now today we want to look at maybe why this is so, and we think that it has a lot to do with stigma. So the dictionary defines stigma as a mark of disgrace or infamy, a stain or reproach as on one's reputation. But today we're not really interested in textbook definitions, and we'd like to explore a little bit what it's like to actually have a mental health issue and a stigma surrounding it.
Hi everyone, I'm Susanna, and I take medication for a chemical imbalance in my brain.
Wait, what did you just say?
That I take medication for a chemical imbalance in my brain.
Okay, just making sure I
yes,
heard
putting it out there.
correctly.
Yes, I did just announce that in front of all these people. And I recognize that that's not easy for everyone to do, and it's not so easy for myself, but there you are, it's out there. So most of the stigma that I've experienced has been surrounding the medication of mental illness. And it's something that, oddly enough, I've met a lot of people who have an opinion on it, whether or not they've experienced this themselves or not. And it's one of those things that, since I have been medicated, people have, decided that they're going to tell me their thoughts on it, whether I want to hear them or not. And I've had people insinuate that I am crazy. I've had people close to me question whether or not I actually need to be medicated. And I've had people question whether or not I'm able to make decisions because I'm on medicine for this issue. Just like to clarify, the stuff I've learned in the last 22 years of my life did not just suddenly go away just because I started taking a new pill in the morning. That's not the case. It's not what happens. And so initially, before I went on this medication, was terrified. I was afraid that it would change me completely. I would be a different person. And while that for a little while was the case, I just didn't want to do it. I didn't want to engage. And I expressed my fears to a mental health professional, and she said, if you had diabetes, you'd take medicine for it, wouldn't you? And I thought, of course, and naturally I would. Why is this any different? And it's not. It's exactly the same, well, not exactly the same thing, but you get the point. It's relatively the same thing. And while medication may not be the answer for everyone and may not work for everyone, it's worked for me.
So we've established that stigmas exist and that they're really not helping anyone at all. And today we'd like to explore a little bit more why they exist and, more importantly, what we can do about them. So it's my very strong belief that stigmas have a lot to do with stories. What stories we tell other people, what stories we're made to feel comfortable sharing, and what stories we're made to feel comfortable listening to. What is deemed acceptable or normal is largely shaped by what people talk about, and people aren't talking about mental illness. So let's talk about the beginning of college, for example, a period that I'm assuming most people here have experienced, and it's also a period of extreme transition. You're getting used to living away from home, in a dorm, with roommates, you're eating in a dining hall, you're taking increasingly challenging courses, and yet when people ask freshmen in college about their experience in the beginning, it usually has little to do with the challenges that this period presents. Now, it's not to say that starting college isn't exciting, because it is, but with all of the changes, it can certainly provide symptoms of anxiety and depression. But if you ask people who are beginning their college year, they'll probably say to you that they've never felt so at home so quickly or just love it so much, and this isn't a very truthful representation of what people actually go through. So this can be changed if people actually start talking about what they're going through. This means when people ask you how your day is going, saying, instead of, "I'm good, thanks," or "fine," actually saying how you're feeling. It's possible to change the current narrative surrounding mental health, but in order to do this, we have to start sharing stories. So now we're going to tell a story.
Hello, it's me again. So we're not going to pretend that we have all the answers on how to end mental health stigma here, and we appreciate the work that national as well as campus organizations are doing. But I guess the only way that I know to contribute is to share my own experience. So on November 1st, at around 1:10 a.m., 2015, my life began again. A combination of the stress of coming out as gay to my parents, combined with an undiagnosed chemical imbalance, combined with a million other factors, presented me with an opportunity to get help or not. And I was very thankfully guided by some people towards getting help, and I'm very happy that that's the way things went. And so I thought that that was the end of it. I thought that, I was in counseling, I had my medication, I was doing everything as I was supposed to do, I was making positive changes in my life. That would be the end of it. And unfortunately, my brain had other ideas. And while the last couple months have been just initial battles of maybe a more long-term situation, the fact of the matter is I'm here and I'm standing, and it's given me kind of a new lens on how we view our lives. Now, something that I always thought about when I was in college is that every single thing I ever did in college mattered. From the second I stepped on this campus to the second I left, everything mattered. If I succeeded, it would define the rest of my life. If I failed, it would even more so define the rest of my life. And that just simply isn't true. We're here for 4 years. And while it's a very important 4 years, and it's been a wonderful 4 years, it's not as though here or anywhere else our individual actions really define the rest of our lives. They may have some influence, they may impact your path, but just because you fail or something doesn't go the way you thought it would, doesn't mean that's always how it's going to be.
So, as just demonstrated quite beautifully, sometimes people do in fact share their mental health narratives, and it can be incredibly empowering. So sharing stories like Susanna just did is really helpful not only to decrease stigma, but for another reason as well. Storytelling and listening to stories is incredibly healing and can actually have profound impacts on the brain. So when you tell a story or when you listen to a story, your brain produces oxytocin, a neurotransmitter or chemical that increases empathy. So everyone probably has some idea of what empathy is. The dictionary defines it as the action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experiences of another, of either the past or present, without having the feelings, thoughts, and experience fully communicated in an objectively explicit manner. It's also the capacity to be able to do this. Now, no two situations are exactly the same, and also extremely important to the notion of empathy is the fact that you can't really exactly know what someone else is going through at any specific time. I thought that the author Leslie Jamison put it quite poignantly when she said, "Empathy comes from the Greek empathia, into, and pathos, feeling, a penetration, a kind of travel. It suggests you enter another person's pain as you'd enter another country, through immigration and customs, border crossing by way of query. What grows where you are, what are the laws, and what animals graze there?" So, in other words, empathy is assuming you know nothing about someone else's situation, and then allowing them to allow you to enter their brain so that you can offer some type of understanding. For example, before this talk, I was really nervous because I am talking about something I'm passionate about, I'm making myself vulnerable, and I shared that I was nervous with a good friend of mine, and she exhibited empathy for me. She isn't up here with us, but she definitely knows what it's like to exhibit her passions in front of a large group of people and to make herself vulnerable, and she was able to exhibit empathy. So this really goes to show that you don't necessarily have to have the same exact experience to exhibit this very important quality. Her sharing empathy for me had a mutual benefit. I felt way, way better knowing that I was not alone in my nerves, and she felt way, way better knowing that her past experiences were not something she was unique in. So this type of sharing and this type of empathy exhibition can be done in a clinical setting, but it also can be done virtually anywhere. So it could be done after this talk, in the dining hall, before class, when you're driving home for Thanksgiving break with that person you don't really know that well. There's virtually no bad time to give or receive empathy in the context of a shared story.
So one of my more positive experiences during this last journey over the past couple months was my experience in group therapy. And initially I was horrified at the prospect of having to be in group therapy because I was under the impression that I would have to share my innermost secrets with strangers. And then I was excited for group therapy because I thought I was going to hear the innermost secrets of strangers. However, that's not really what it's based upon. So it's based upon my experience was based upon the idea of sharing common experiences having to do with emotions, whether that be anger, frustration, fear, pain, sadness. And as I heard the narratives of other people, I began to realize the very important key fact that I wasn't alone. You always hear that phrase, you are not alone, but it's at times very hard to think that and very hard to believe it. But hearing the stories of other people made me realize, wow, okay, maybe that is really the case. And in hearing their narratives, as much as I wished and wanted to work towards moving myself to a better state of mind, I wanted them to as well. And that may sound a little happy-go-lucky, but once you become connected with another person through a shared story, you want to see them succeed. You want to see a positive outcome. And I guess that, to me, is a true indication of not being alone. So to those of you in this room, to those of you not in this room who are experiencing a mental health difficulty or any sort of difficulty, recognize that you are not alone. If that's the one thing you take away from this talk, know that you are not alone, and there are other narratives out there that you can empathize with. Depression. Recognizing that this feeling sometimes is so absurd because you cannot do the things that are so easy for other people.
Anxiety. Convincing yourself that groundless theories of imminent catastrophe are in fact true. So these are our pasts, but we think that they can be prologue for something else. We hope that from today you can start sharing your stories and decreasing stigma that will ultimately create a different mental health narrative.
Thank you.
Thank you.